Warning. I chain smoke and I say fuck a lot. But I accept myself for the way I am. I accept you too. Viewer discretion advised.
I'd just like to say 3 words. Scary German guy. Who else are we going to get to translate this thing?
The mechanism of action of ACT is embarrassingly clear and simple. It is a terminator of DNA synthesis. DNA is the basis for all life on this planet. It's the central molecule in every living cell.
So I was watching this old debate on RT with Dr. Duesberg and a couple people, and I thought it was pretty good and worth sharing. But also a few things stuck out to me.
From the point of view of AIDS research or AIDS science, this is a big disaster because the drugs are all aimed at inhibiting a virus, the so-called AIDS virus, which doesn't do anything. It is not pathogenic. There are 40 million people on this planet, according to the WHO, who have HIV. Most of them don't even know about it. They're completely healthy. And they carry the virus that doesn't do any harm. Companies try to treat the virus that doesn't do anything with drugs that are inevitably toxic. Okay. The drugs were developed. The ACT was developed 40 years ago for one purpose, to kill human cells for cancer chemotherapy. And the result is they have never, ever cured one AIDS patient. They even say that. 30, 40 million are not treated and they're doing well. It's the people who are getting these drugs that are inevitably toxic. They are designed to terminate DNA synthesis. That's the central molecule of life. You're dying from that. That is AIDS by prescription.
I believe that AIDS is not or cannot even be an infectious disease. See, an infectious disease, believe it or not, has a certain criteria to it. How it happens, when it happens. For example, if you get infected by a bug or by a virus, within weeks or months after a contact or after that infection, you will have symptoms of a disease. In HIV and AIDS, however, we are told you get sick 10 years later, 10 years after infection. That is not how viruses or bacteria even work. They work fast or never. They are very simple mechanisms, like a little clock, that can do only one thing, go around the dial once, and that takes 24 to 48 hours with the virus. There's no way that virus could possibly slow down or wait a week or wait 10 years. That is totally absurd.
I'm absolutely dismayed to find out that for about 15 years, the essential control of electron microscopy was neglected, completely neglected. And it's only very recently, about 2 years ago, that 2 papers came out in which finally electron microscopy was used to verify the presence of virus particles in samples which were for all these 15 years regarded as pure virus. And to my greatest dismay, these pictures were showing practically nothing else but cell debris.
In October 1997, Continuum published an interview with Professor Luc Montagnier, who first claimed to have discovered HIV. His team had not been able to purify HIV.
Well, of course we looked for it. We saw some particles, but they didn't have the morphology of retroviruses.
He later said,
I repeat, we did not purify.
It was startling that Professor Montagnier decided to acknowledge in his interview with Jamel Tahi in Continuum that as far back as 1983, his team were not able to purify anything that you might call HIV, despite what he termed a Roman effort.
The professor is essentially saying that the companies that you represent are killing their patients.
I would say that Professor Duesberg's opinions on the good side are disrespectful, and on the worst side are tantamount to murder. I just want to say that when 3-drug therapy was introduced in 1996, we were able to see a decrease in AIDS-related deaths after 4 years of 84%. So that's doing exactly the opposite of what he's saying. The drugs were not killing people. They actually have made an enormous impact on saving people's lives.
He's saying that some of the drugs that are being developed are actually hurting their patients, even killing them, and you're defending the industry. And in researching this program, there is a debate, though there's a very small minority, and the professor is one of them, that these drugs are very counterproductive, and actually it's creating more and more drugs to just keep the process going. It's good business. I mean, that's one of the criticisms.
You know, this brings me back to the mid-'80s when I was a consultant to Burroughs Wellcome, which was the company that introduced the first AIDS drug, AZT. And we would go out to interview people and talk to them about sometimes their hesitancies in taking the drug. And we now know that AZT is an incredibly toxic drug, and most people try not to prescribe it when they don't need to. But we heard back then, especially from African Americans, that they thought that the drug had been created by the U.S. government in order, as a type of genocide. And, you can understand where opinions like that came from when people are coming home, taking this drug, having all kinds of horrible reactions, and people around them are seeing this and saying, well, I don't want any part of that. But, we're 25 years from that. We're not in the mid-'80s anymore. And, so while there may have been some suppositions that could have existed to support Dr. Duesberg's theories back then, let's deal with what we know now.
You're not the most liked person.
And as you can hear from Steve and Dennis, they're calling everything I'm saying Duesberg's opinions. But I'm relying on the toxicity of the antiviral drugs, on studies that have been published, so-called controlled studies in the New England Journal of Medicine, in the Lancet more recently, the Concord study, that has used AZT, the same drug that he now admits is a little less toxic than it used to be. That was not by Africans. That was reported by an Anglo-French study in the Lancet, the oldest medical journal, that it would increase mortality 25% compared to untreated people, and that it was not recommended as a drug to prevent AIDS, and that is how it is prescribed now. That is not my opinion. I am not a mass murderer for citing evidence that is published in the Lancet and in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Scary German guy's bitching.
What is called AIDS is made up of 29 diseases, all of which existed long before the AIDS eras.
If you don't really like what the professor has to say, why don't you just ignore him? But he seems to be constantly attacked. And I'm not defending his position, but maybe just his right to be able to say what he wants. That's why he's on the program.
I think that anyone should be able to say what they want. This is the United States, and that's one of the greatest parts about this country. And the problem is, as I think that Dr. Brun just referred to, is when you have an extreme opinion that gets attention and it's based on completely obsolete data, it can actually cause harm. This really ought to go away. We should be focusing on the future and, how to improve things from here, how to get these drugs into more people's hands, especially in the developing world, and stop really chasing our tail about something that has no relevance anymore.
Okay, Professor, there was some allegations laid against you. Are you a dangerous man?
If Dennis and Steve think that science is dangerous, it's based on evidence, and I have evidence for every one of these numbers. That's why it was censored, the paper. If they had been able to answer it, giving concrete answers, why AZT, which is still in all antiviral drugs, it's one element of the cocktail of 3 or 4. Why AZT, which is designed to kill human cells, it is a DNA chain terminator, is all of a sudden fine, that would be another matter. There are no new publications saying that. There are American publications in the New England Journal of Medicine which say that this treatment, half of all AIDS patients in America nowadays die from diseases that have never been attributed to HIV. They are all attributed to antiviral drugs. I'm talking about liver diseases, heart diseases, and kidney diseases that they're dying from. It's published in the New England Journal of Medicine and in JAMA. Reisler is one of the references. You can look it up yourself in 2003, in 2006, in 2007, very recently, not 20 or 30 years ago, as you imply.
Today, the Biden administration announced their investment of $3.2 billion from the American Rescue Plan as part of the COVID-19 antiviral development strategy. It's a whole of government effort aimed at developing the next generation of COVID-19 treatments, as well as preparing us for future threats. The program is called the Antiviral Program for Pandemics, and it aims to catalyze the development of new medicines to combat COVID-19 and, importantly, to prepare for other pandemic threats. Antivirals can and are an important complement to existing vaccines, especially for individuals with certain conditions that might put them at a greater risk. And it also adds a line of defense against other unexpected emerging things like variants of concern that we are currently dealing with.
ACT, which is still in all antiviral drugs, it's one element of the cocktail of 3 or 4. Why ACT, which is designed to kill human cells, it is a DNA chain terminator, is all of a sudden fine? That would be another matter. There are no new publications saying that.
It's going to accelerate the clinical testing of promising antiviral medicines that are already in various stages of development, including clinical trial. Things like the Pfizer protease inhibitor, the Atia Roche RNA polymerase inhibitor, the Merck mutagenic nucleoside, malnupiravir, and others that are in that pipeline. So it's to be accelerating things that are already in process. The other pillar is discovery. And this is very important because this is modeled after the highly successful program developed decades ago for the targeted development of antiretroviral drugs for HIV, which have led to transforming therapies to control HIV, namely discovering new antiviral medications.
How had Peter Duesberg felt all those years before when he first challenged the AIDS establishment?
A bit like Galileo must have felt when he ended up in prison. Probably somewhat satisfied that nobody could prove him wrong, but also saddened that he didn't get a forum, and in the case of AIDS, that 150,000 people have since developed AIDS in this country. Many of them could have been saved.
Fucking stoned.
I got a motherfucking spaceship. Oh, fuck. Oh, cool. I got it.